All right, subwoofers for two-channel listening. Point of this video is to kind of dispel the confusion and assumption that subwoofers need to be complicated in two-channel listening. Super easy in home theater because you typically have a processor that has a crossover built in. You run your room correction and it builds the crossover for you, and you don't really have to do much. With two-channel, it's a little bit more of a manual process and a little bit more confusing to connect up. So let's try to make that easier. Start with a disclaimer. I'm not a professional YouTuber. I know the production quality here is not great, but hopefully I can offset that by the fact that there's not going to be a bunch of fluff here. You don't have to watch an introduction. You don't have to listen to someone that loves to hear themselves talk. Just going to give you the information you need, and hopefully this will be helpful. After I talk about how to set up the sub, I will get more into kind of two-channel versus home theater for subs, and a little bit of information about how to select a sub based on its performance. So let's jump right in. First thing to talk about is your preamp. So the whole point here is you've got a preamp that doesn't have subwoofer outputs, doesn't have a crossover built in, probably something similar to this one, where you've just got RCA or balanced outputs that go straight to your amp, and it's not obvious how to connect a sub. So first thing we'll talk about is how to do that. So normally you have your RCA or your balanced cables going from your preamp to your amp, and what we're going to do here is, instead of that, we're going to go from our preamp to our sub, and then from our sub to our amp. So first thing that's important is you need to select an amp or a sub that has line level inputs and outputs. It's not super common. You would think it would be more common since this is the best way to do two-channel subwoofers, but it's not. A lot of times they'll just have inputs, or they'll even have speaker level inputs, but no outputs. The reason I say that you want line level inputs and outputs instead of speaker level inputs and outputs, which is actually more common, is you're basically, your sub is doing your crossover, and after the crossover, the upper frequencies of the crossover are going to your amp. So instead of sending the full signal to your amp and then going out to your subwoofer, and then your subwoofer applying the filter and sending the high frequencies to your speakers, you're never even sending those low frequencies to your amp, so it's easier on your amp. Another thing to think about here is the quality of the crossover. A crossover is not a simple thing, so you should select a sub from a manufacturer that you think is capable of building a good quality crossover that's going to do a good job integrating your sub with your speakers. I won't espouse any opinions here, but I will say that this is a KEF subwoofer. A brand like KEF obviously has a lot of experience with building speakers and understanding what needs to happen for a speaker to integrate well with a subwoofer, and as such they more than likely are going to build a really good crossover versus a more home theater focused subwoofer brand that isn't renowned for their speakers, and they know that their sub is likely going to be in a configuration where the processor or AVR is doing the crossover. That crossover probably is not going to be a of the same caliber as something like this KEF. So something else to mention here, if you are integrating multiple subwoofers, so let's say you want to do stereo subs, or you just want to do mono, but multiple subs to boost your output. I'm not going to talk about stereo subs and whether or not you can localize subwoofer frequencies. That's out of scope for this video. I'll just say this. If you want to do that, what you can do is just run let's say the left in and out from this sub, and then you can run the right in and out to your other sub for stereo, or you can go into this sub from your preamp, out to your other sub, and then in your other sub, and then out from your other sub to your amp, if that makes sense. And then you're basically daisy chaining subwoofers to put them in mono. But that's, this is generally how you're going to want to set up subwoofers for 2-channel listening, where your sub is doing the crossover for you. As far as setting the crossover and the gain, there's a couple of things that you need to do there. One is you need to understand the frequency response of your speakers and your subwoofer, and you need to set that crossover where your speakers start dropping off, and you need to select a subwoofer that is going to be able to pick up where your speakers are dropping off. Your goal in the end is, basically a flat response from your subwoofer to where your speakers take over. And if you do that well, that is going to result in what many would describe as a well-integrated subwoofer. So you can stop here if you're just watching this video to understand how to integrate a subwoofer into your 2-channel system. That's pretty much it. I'm not going to talk about how to read frequency response, or how to set the crossover. That's also out of scope for this video. There's probably plenty of data out there to understand that. From here, I'm going to talk about home theater versus 2-channel, some misconceptions about subwoofers, some words people use to describe subwoofers and what those words mean, and some data. So we'll start with 2-channel oriented, or what some people would describe as musical subwoofers versus home theater subwoofers. The main thing to understand there is that the goal of a home theater subwoofer is a flat frequency response down to 20 hertz or even lower, because the intent is to accurately reproduce the frequency response in the signal. You're watching a movie, you just want to hear what the creator of the movie intends for you to hear. That's not necessarily the case with music. A lot of audiophiles or music-oriented people, their intent is actually to modify the signal in some way to get a more live-sounding reproduction. So, a flat, low frequency response may not always be the goal for a 2-channel system. This obviously is a very small subwoofer. It has dual 6.5-inch drivers, but it is, it's just right for my goal here, which is a music system in a relatively small, clearly imperfect room. I have a home theater system also with big 15-inch subwoofers in it, and I tried one of those subwoofers in here, and it sounded horrible. It's not a matter of configuration at a certain point. It's a matter of those really low frequencies. While that may be part of the signal in the music you're listening to, it could have a negative impact on what you're trying to achieve, because maybe your room has decorations in it, then they're going to rattle at those low frequencies. Or at those low frequencies, they're they're what many people would describe as muddy or slow, um, and that's not what you want, right? So, um, that's another thing when people talk about a subwoofer being musical and with an implication that that makes it a better sub, or you'll hear a home theater guy talking about um, a sub being objectively superior from an engineering perspective because it's flatter to a lower frequency response. um, you may not always want that. So um, it may be superior from an engineering perspective, but it may not be superior given what you're trying to achieve in a two-channel system. Um, Touching on the muddy versus fast or accurate or tight, all those words that people use to describe subwoofers. Um, it's the same thing. If you've got a subwoofer that rolls off at like 30 hertz, you're going to describe that sub as tight and fast. If you've got a subwoofer that has a flat high output response down to 15 hertz, um, you're going to describe that subwoofer as muddy just because you're hearing those really low frequencies. And more so than hearing it, you're feeling it. And, that's the impression it gives that, it's technically a superior subwoofer, but the experience you get when you hear it may not be what you want. Um, the other thing to talk about with muddy versus fast or music versus home theater subwoofers is distortion. This is something that people don't talk about with subwoofers a lot, but something else that can cause you to describe a subwoofer as muddy or slow or boomy is distortion. And uh, distortion is basically the subwoofer working harder than it really should be. So one of the big causes of distortion with the subwoofer is called port chuffing, which is when you have a ported sub, you begin to hear the the air moving through that port. Um, it's a very distinct sound, and it's unpleasant. And that's the result of the subwoofer being configured or designed for maximum output with no consideration for that distortion. Um, and you can solve that by having more subwoofers and lowering the output per subwoofer. Um, just as a quick note, if you're trying to judge how many subwoofers you need, um, adding a second of the same subwoofer is going to give you about plus 6 dB in SPL. So it's not double the output per se, but it's pretty significant when you compare two individual subwoofers. One that is going to give you 6 dB flat output over another one is usually going to be close to twice the price. It's going to be close to twice the size typically also. So it may make more sense to use two of a smaller, less expensive subwoofer and get more coverage in your room and combat those room modes a little better. What else? The other thing to think about with distortion is, and this is another element of musical versus home theater subwoofers. Um, Part of combating that distortion is just the design of the subwoofer. Like I said, if you have a ported sub that is not well controlled, you're going to get that port chuffing, you get distortion, and this is why people say they don't like ported subs. It's not the port itself. It's uh, a combination of the sub is not designed properly to prevent port chuffing. Um, and for certain applications that's okay, because if you're listening to a loud explosion, you're not going to notice that port chuffing in a home theater system. But if you're listening to music analytically, and you get a big bump in that low bass, and the sub is not well controlled, you're going to get distortion, you're going to get port chuffing, um, and it's going to sound bad. And your interpretation of that is going to be, this is not a good subwoofer. Um, so you can make a ported sub um, perform well in a musical system, um, but it's less foolproof. With a sealed sub, you don't have to worry about port chuffing. You're not going to have as much distortion to worry about. Um, so that's something to consider. It's kind of a misconception from both ends. One, from the musical end or audiophile end, is that a sub is either good or bad. It's not the case. It's not that it's musical or home theater oriented. It's just understanding how the sub works, what the sub is designed to do from a purely technical perspective, and um, how that will integrate into your system. And then on the other end of it, the home theater guys, um, they think that a sub should just maximize output, and they don't care about distortion, and that is not necessarily the best thing for a musical system. So, um, quick note on that, home theater, the home theater um, approach to things versus the audiophile or two-channel approach to things, um, it, it benefits you to understand both approaches and uh, apply the data-driven perspective of home theater to your musical system, and also to apply the subjective perspective of a musical approach to your home theater system. They're both things are important. Data is important. It's not the end all be all. The the data behind a speaker or a subwoofer or an amp or a preamp um, is not it's not necessarily going to tell you how it's going to sound in your room. So it's going to help you narrow down your options. It's going to help you design your system and take a lot of the guesswork out of it. It's useful. It's not something to throw away because you know what your ears like. You need both to really design the best system you can. And lastly, just a quick note, why should you listen to what I have to say? Um, I think, a lot of people are either kind of on the audiophile side of things, or they're on the home theater side of things, and they don't care about what the other team has to say. Um, like I just suggested, it's important to be well informed about both ends of it. I've been a two-channel enthusiast for about 20 years, and I've also been a home theater enthusiast for probably even longer than that. And I worked in the industry professionally for a while. My father owns an integration company. I worked for him both as a technician and as the general manager running the company. Um, my approach integrates the both perspectives, and I think the outcome is the best you can possibly get, knowing both the objective and the subjective. Um, well, hopefully this video has been useful. Um, Let me know if you guys need any more information.